Good morning, everyone. Can I ask you to move forward? Don't be shy. Come and sit towards the front of the room. It's a huge room and a little tricky for the speakers if everyone's dotted in very far off locations. Thank you.
That's why, as you were saying, that's why just talking like this, just feel, there's a limited amount you really want to say. It would have been better to have you as well, to be able to say like you, and to start with to get the actions, but you can't do it in this format.
You do some though.
Yeah.
Not at liberty to tell you that.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome to this session. Has a very interesting title. And I'm sure that by the end of the session you will agree that frameworks are not boring at all. I'm very pleased to introduce two of my favorite colleagues. We have Tim Charles Phillips, who is the head of teacher development for the British Council globally, who works closely with colleagues from across the different offices of the British Council to ensure that our teacher development resources and materials are suitable for the context in which we work. And we have John Evan Shackleton. I hope you're paying attention to these names, ladies and gentlemen, who is a senior training consultant for the British Council here in India and has been responsible for developing our English language quality standards program, which we're extremely proud of, and he'll be talking to you about that today. Thank you. Can I introduce Tim and John?
Okay, thank you very much, Alison. Very warm welcome to people in the room here in Hyderabad and also to people who are watching us from different parts of the world. There are some presentations out there that might attempt to cover one framework. There are some rare presentations that might include two, but as far as we know, we are the first people to attempt to include three frameworks in one single presentation. We're all very, very excited about that. When we were planning this session sometime back in 1972, we had the idea that we would ask every member of the audience to stand up and introduce themselves. But when we looked at this, we calculated it would take about 3 days to do that. So we're not going to do that, but we would, nonetheless, like to know a little bit about you. George asked you earlier to put up your hands if you considered yourself to be a teacher or a teacher educator. We've got the same kind of question. If you currently work in a school, can you put your hand up? Okay, great. If you currently work in a university, can you put your hand up? Okay, all right, that's very interesting. All right, thank you very much for that. Okay, our first question for you, really, which we will lead into, is why are we doing this? We're talking today about three frameworks which we believe will be very useful and very helpful in your and our daily lives. We're going to be talking about the CPD Framework for teachers. We're going to be talking about the CPD Framework for teacher educators. And we're going to be talking about the Quality Standards Framework, which is part of our Quality Standards program. Why are we doing this? We asked ourselves in the preparation for this, this very fundamental question. Why, in fact, are we taking the time, we the British Council taking the time, to draw up these frameworks and to think about what they should look like and what they should include? And we came up with 3 reasons. As you all know, the British Council works all around the world, so we felt that we had a global perspective, that we had been working with teachers and teacher educators for a long time, and we felt that all of that insight and all of that collaboration gave us some information about teachers and teacher educators and schools that would be useful because they were of a global nature. That was the first reason. The second reason was that we wanted to establish some kind of common language, some way of talking about the quality of teachers, the quality of teacher educators, the quality of schools, in a way that would make it easier for us to have a shared understanding, a common starting point. And the third reason to explain why we were doing this is really to do with the idea of change. One of the topics that we've looked at is the idea of moving from quantity to quality. So as an example, there's a lot of change that's taking place at the moment, and the frameworks that we're talking about aim to encapsulate some of that change. So that's the rationale behind what we're doing, behind developing the 3 frameworks. All right now. What we'd like you to do is to turn to the person sitting next to you, okay, and we'd like you to ask 3 questions. The first question is, are you a teacher? Okay, and if the answer is yes, then if you could move on to those next 2 questions. How good a teacher are you, and how do you know? If the answer to the first question, are you a teacher, is no, then we'd like you to ask the question, well, can you think about a teacher that you had at school or a teacher that you know now, right? And answer the question, how good a teacher were they, and how did you know? Okay, so could you do that now? Could you ask those 3 questions of the person sitting next to you, please? And we'll know if you're asking different questions. Okay, there are some microphones that are circulating. All right then. Would anybody like to start the ball rolling and answer those 2 questions? Does anybody know? Yes, okay, the lady there, please, yes. Where are the microphones? They're coming. Okay then. Are you going to tell us about your partner who is a teacher, or are you going to tell us about your partner who told you about a teacher that they know? Which ones of those 2? About your partner. Okay. All right, great. When you're ready.
Hello. Hello world. Good morning. As per the question, My friend says that she is a teacher, and she admits that she is a teacher because she is growing to the level of profession, and as well as going back to the learner's level. Secondly, I would like to quote Frost, who says that there are some teachers who will demoralize you, that you cannot even move, but some are who will pat you at the back and you will just start flying in the sky.
Great.
Thank you, all of
Okay,
you.
thank you very much for sharing that with us. But can you answer, please, those two questions? How good a teacher is the person sitting next to you? Is she excellent? Is she very good?
Very good.
Very good, okay. And how do you know that you're very good?
I'm very good because I try to my do best. Till I think I'm the best, I'll do the best.
Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? The man in the second row. So the question is, how good a teacher is the person sitting next to you, and how does he know?
Good morning, everybody. The person sitting next to me, he told me that he considers himself to be a very good teacher.
Okay.
From the feedback he gets from his students and parents.
Okay. All right. Feedback from the students, feedback from the people that you deal with, and your conclusion from that is they are happy and that therefore you are doing a very good job. So you're a very good teacher. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Excellent. Is there something you would like to add?
Yeah.
I could see you kind of...
As for myself, I also consider myself to be a very good teacher.
Okay, good.
And there are some pointers to that. I understand the syllabi which I have to transmit to my class.
Okay, you understand the syllabus that you're teaching. Okay, that's good.
And I also understand the methods to transmit that syllabi to my students.
Okay.
And I understand their level. And I also understand to establish equilibrium between what I have to teach and what they can learn.
Okay then. So you've got an understanding of your learners. You've got an understanding of the tools that you need to help your learners, and you've got an understanding of the starting point, the end point, to bring about that. Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you very much for that. There's a gentleman there at the back.
Yeah, as far as the two questions are concerned, and from my perspective, I am a teacher. I am not a good teacher always.
Okay.
To me, the parameter of a good teacher is that the students remain active in the class. For me, I am not permanently good. Sometimes I am. Sometimes I am moderate. And sometimes when I have to complete the curriculum, I am bad.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. So, before you sit down there, if I can just ask you another question then. You said that one of the ways that you might tell if you're a good teacher or not is if the students are active in the class. So at moments when they're not active in the class, you think, I should be doing something differently. I could be doing that better.
No.
Is that what you mean? No?
No. What I meant is, even the spaces of silence is an activity, if it can be treated. But when I feel that I'm not treating those spaces, or when I'm not being able to treat those spaces, when I am not being able to initiate something which would lead them to be active, those are the moments when I feel that I'm not decently good.
Okay, I understand. Thank you very much for that. Okay, by the end of this session, what we hope is that we will have a taxonomy and a methodology and a way of being able to answer that question, or those questions, in a way that is understandable and shared amongst all of us. Okay, we have two more questions for you, and these are they. So if I can just pick up on the last comment there. There are areas of your teaching or things that you do in the classroom that you recognize that in some way you could do differently. Okay? Knowing that is one thing, but what do you actually do? Where do you look for the information that will help you to develop professionally? Where is it? Where is all of the information? Having established that there are things that you can do to improve and to develop, where do you go to find the tasks, the activities, the things that will help you to get better? And we hope that by the end of this session, we will also have an answer for those two questions as well. Because in the form of my colleague Tim Phillips, help is at hand, because the CPD framework is coming to town. Tim, over to you.
Good morning, everyone in the hall and around the world who are watching. Yes, I'm the help at hand, and I'm introducing the CPD framework, which is coming to town and is in the process of being worked out. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about a framework with a number of characteristics. It's got several numbers attached to it. 3 areas of competence, 12 professional practices, 101 elements, and 4 stages, and we think enough resources to keep you busy for a lifetime, because that's what CPD is. It's a lifetime adventure. It's a lifelong process. So I'm going to say a little bit more about these different elements. I'd mentioned, if you were at the presentation yesterday, I did a short description of some of these things, but I'm going to look in a bit more detail at this. So, competence. What we're saying is that you could divide the overall competence of a teacher into the area of qualification. So what, in terms of the teacher's educational qualifications, the level of education in general, but also specific qualifications to qualify them to be a teacher. And of course that's essential normally in a state school system, in any educational system, is that teachers should be qualified. There's language proficiency. In the case of English teachers, so the knowledge of your language and the confidence and the ability you have to use it, and so that also the teacher can demonstrate to his or her learners that ability to learn a language. And the 12 professional practices. And in terms of assessing yourself, of evaluating where you are in terms of your development, we've indicated 4 stages for the development of teachers in terms of how a teacher is at a particular stage of development in each practice. So we have the terms awareness, understanding, engagement, and integration. And that's a gradual process of developing more and more knowledge and skill in each of these practices. And we'll look at those in a bit more detail in a minute. So what does it look like? So we have a diagram here. As you can see, it's a wheel. It's a wheel that has a part taken out of it, which also looks a bit like a C for continuing, but a C also for comprehensive. and taking the analogy of CPD, continuing professional development. It's not working. Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, sounds better. Taking the link with continuing professional development, CPD, it's practice-based. We have the 12 practices, and it's detailed, and I'll show you some of the detail in a minute. So the shape here, you can see it's got a color coding. The color coding represents the different stages, and those stages are moving towards the center, which is quality in the classroom. And that's the theme, really, of what we're trying to support here, is how do you develop your quality as a teacher and put that quality into the classroom at the service of your learners. And what we're also saying is that a teacher will not necessarily be completely at the same stage of development in every aspect and every practice. So, for example, we have a practice understanding learners. The teacher may feel that they are very good at understanding the learners, but there's another one, say, assessing learning, and the teacher may not be at quite such a stage of development. So we'd expect to see what we call a jagged profile for teachers. And also represented in the image is the language proficiency and the qualifications. So that's the overall picture of the framework. So I expect, as you come to this conference, you're very clear about what CPD means. Here's a few statements around what it consists of. And this underpins what we're trying to do in terms of provide a framework and the resources to develop, so that we can provide a way in which you can plan and you can keep continuing in your development, and that you can identify specific knowledge, skills and practice, and then you can find the ways in which you can improve your knowledge and skills in those areas. What is also important is that we're trying to enable and help teachers to take responsibility for their own professional development. And that requires reflection and evaluation on what you're doing. It's not just receiving something, it's actually taking the responsibility and making the decisions yourself for what will help you best. And that's reflected in most of the research and literature around continuing professional development. I'd like to emphasize the last point here, benefits you as a teacher and your learners in schools. Obviously, there's a benefit to you as a teacher, but what is most important is how does it benefit you, your learners? There's many things you can do in terms of professional development. You can engage with other teachers, you can network, as happens at events like this, you can attend talks, you can read, you can study, you can do research, you can do many things. And that is professionally interesting and engaging for you and helps you in your own thinking to develop. But how does that actually have an impact on how your learners perform in the class and how on the experience of your learners in the classroom? And I think that's a critical theme, a critical aspect for you to consider in terms of evaluating the impact of your CPD. Does it make a difference directly on the performance of your learners? And that can have a big impact on actually what you decide to do, because some things may be interesting for you, but some things actually, if you analyze it, would really make a big difference to the needs of your learners. So what can you do with it? Well, it's a kind of cycle, and you probably have seen these CPD cycles. The first thing is to evaluate. Having evaluated and identified different aspects of your knowledge and skills, you can identify learning opportunities and pathways to meet your development needs. Once you've identified those pathways, then you can plan and carry out that phase of your professional development. And then what's so important is evaluating your professional learning from that. And as I suggest, one of the key things is evaluating what effect does it have on the experience and performance of my learners. And this is a kind of cycle, because you reach the end of that phase of evaluating professional learning, and then in this continuous concept, you go back and you think again, and you go forward in the next stage. So, a little bit more about stages. Here's definitions of stages. Going from the particular professional practice, so let's say planning lessons is one of the professional practices. At an awareness stage, you've heard of the professional practice, but your knowledge of it is very limited and probably not enough to say very much about it or even to do very much with it. Next stage, you understand in more detail what it means and why it's important, but you haven't necessarily applied it in your practice. The next stage, engagement, is that you actually demonstrate this. If someone came to your lesson, they could see this in practice in your work. And then at the integration stage is that you've taken this to a high level of competency, and it consistently informs what you do at work. So you're a good example of how this practice, for example, how you plan your lessons, how you manage your lessons, how you evaluate your learners, all these different things. You're a very strong example of that. So we've got professional practices, we've got stages, so you can then look at an individual professional practice and say, well, in my understanding, where am I at this stage? So you can take this model, and then you can map out your profile on this. So the first one here is understanding learning. So for example, I'm thinking of a teacher. I feel I'm at the understanding stage there, because yes, I understand my learners quite well, but I realize there's a lot of information, there's a lot of thinking around how you understand individual learners, and I feel maybe I need more to understand more. The next one, planning lessons and courses. Well, I do that all the time. I'm a teacher, I plan lessons. So yes, I feel that I'm at the engagement stage, but I feel possibly that I could do more. The next one, planning the lesson, managing the lesson. I do that all the time, and I feel quite happy about it. So you can see, you can go round and you can plot your profile, and then you can see this is the jagged profile. And then also you can add in here, this is your English language teaching qualifications. So for this teacher, perhaps they have a diploma. Their educational qualifications, they have a degree, and also their level of English, which, for example, is C1. So then you get this simple map, but you can see here that there are some areas where this teacher would feel that they're definitely in need of development, possibly. Those are the ones where they're still in the engagement stage, in the outer part of the circle, particularly integrating ICT and using inclusive resources. So the teacher might feel, well, that's the area I need to work on. Although they may say, well, actually, yes, I don't know much about that, but actually in my teaching, there are other things actually that are more important that would, again, have more impact on my learners. So if I improved my ability to assess learners, for example, I'm at the integration stage with that. If I improve by, if I go to, sorry, I'm at the engagement stage there. If I go to the integration stage, then that will have a great impact on my learners. So that's what I want to concentrate on. So that's a kind of overall view. But as I said, we're talking about a detailed analysis. So then you can dig down. So here we've got the professional practice managing the lesson. And we've got for each of these elements, we have 101 elements in total across the 12 professional practices. And you can, and this is a sample of some of the elements for managing the lesson. And you can then look at this and do in more detail, well, where do I feel I am? Am I at A for awareness, U for understanding, E for engagement, I for integration? And so this teacher, as an example, has controlling the pace and timing of activities, feels they're at the engagement stage. They demonstrate this in the lesson, and signaling transitions between the stages of the lessons. So you can see here quite a lot of detail and specific things that you might need to explore in order to actually develop yourself in this bigger area. So you've got the higher level area, the more general area of assessing yourself against the practices, and then you can, within an individual one, so for example, if you did, on the previous screen, here, if you do this and you identify, say, that you're assessing learners is an area you want to develop further, then you can go forward and look at this in more detail and find the particular aspects of that that will help you develop in that area. So it gives you a much more detailed breakdown. So you've got plenty of opportunity to self-evaluate. Let me go forward, it's not moving. So what does it show? Well, first of all, I guess it shows your honesty. Are you honest with yourself? Or if you're showing it to someone else, are you honest with anyone else? And that is a question, because sometimes, yeah, we want, some people are hypercritical, some people are very forgiving of themselves. So it's not, I don't think that self-evaluation is necessarily an easy thing to do. It requires a certain honesty and clear thinking about yourself. Also, I think it will also show your interpretation of teaching practices, because also there is a certain understanding of each of these, and we realize that. So we realize that, for example, when you look at the detail, say, signaling transitions between stages of the lessons was one element in managing the lesson. That maybe teachers don't necessarily understand what that means, because that's not something they've thought about, or the language. So sometimes there needs to be more understanding of that, and we'll provide extra information around how you understand this. But then, once you've got through that, your self-evaluation will show your strengths, and it will show your areas for further development and growth. So where does it lead? Well, it leads to your development pathway, because once you've done that, you can say, well, these are the particular things I need to look at. And a development pathway, as you can see, is not necessarily a straight route. You might do many things along the way, but also you've got that nice sun, you've got that focus, and the focus, as you can see from the image we have, the focus is quality in the classroom. So it leads you to a pathway, it takes you along the pathway towards that element of quality in the classroom related to the needs you've identified. So how do you find your pathway? Well, as I said yesterday, we're in the final stages of the first development of this, and we'll be providing a lot more information through our website, etc., about what's going to be available. So I'm giving you a preview here, and we'll be following up by sending information when this is released. So I'm working with a global team, so I'm looking at how do we reach globally. We'll reach globally through our website, Teaching English website, and you'll be able to go to the CPD homepage of the Teaching English website and then find what you need. So what will you find? So what you'll find is you'll go to the page, and there's a CPD homepage, and you'll also see a lot of a click-through for the 12 different professional practices. So here they all are: planning lessons, understanding learners, managing the lesson, knowing the subject, managing resources, assessing learning, integrating ICT, taking responsibility for your professional development. I couldn't fit that in the box. Using inclusive practices, using multilingual approaches, promoting 21st century skills, and understanding educational policies and practice. So you'll go through to a page and you'll see these in images, and you'll be able to, well, on the home page, you'll see a video which will take you through the process of evaluating yourself, and you'll be able to evaluate yourself, as I've shown. Then you can go through to a particular practice, and when you go through to one of these, you'll see a menu. You can evaluate yourself in more detail in that particular practice, and then also you'll have you can choose a training module, and the training modules will be linked to particular elements of the professional practice, and you can choose resources from all the resources which maybe you're familiar with on Teaching English, all of them mapped to this particular practice. So, for example, any video or articles, blog posts, publications, seminars, and webinars. So, a range of resources, as we said at the beginning, more resources than you can probably, that will last a lifetime. Also, and what we'll probably be doing is previewing a lot of this through Facebook, because we have a very active Facebook page, and we'll be using that to present the evaluation tool, so to ask users of Facebook to evaluate themselves and to engage with the community. Because what we want to do is, we're presenting this, but this is all an accumulation of a huge amount of experience, and we want to draw in the understanding and experience of teachers from all over the world. So it's an opportunity through our Facebook community for people to evaluate themselves and then to talk about and engage with their experience and what it is, what it means for individual teachers in individual places to plan lessons, for example. What's the characteristics? What is the needs, etc. So we're hoping that we can engage and create this global community that can be engaged in taking this further forward. Because it's okay having this, but it's what it needs is teachers engaged and teachers, us being able to draw in all the experience of teachers. And so in terms of what you do on the pathway, these resources will enable you to network. That's really important, talking, as you know, as talking to teachers, learning from other teachers, training, observing teachers, so maybe video of classrooms, but also in your own work, learning from observation, experimenting, so taking an idea and trying it out and then thinking about it, studying, reading, all those things that are very important to professional development, and research. So engaging in research, whether that's researching into what your learners think or researching into specific aspects of your own performance. And these stepping stones fit together, they're not separate. The pathway, these are the stepping stones on the pathway, they all fit together, and therefore teachers should try to understand this as a whole. It's not individual bits, but it's all contributing to that ultimate aim, which is quality in the classroom and the quality of the experience of your learners. So now we've looked at the individual, but one of the other benefits of all this is that the individual teacher, the benefit to the learner, and ultimately the benefit to the school. So we're going to look more widely now, and we'll move on to the second of our frameworks, and I'll pass over to John.
Great, thank you very much. So that's the CPD framework for teachers, and what we'd like to do now is to have a look at the CPD framework for teacher educators. And we have a couple of questions for you to begin the discussion and start thinking about what it is, what are the skills that a teacher educator needs to have, and secondly, what kind of role or what kind of roles is it that a teacher educator plays. So what I'd like you to do, the people sitting on this side of the room, if you could ask the person and discuss with the person sitting next to you that first question. So think about teacher educator. Think about somebody whose job it is, right, to help teachers develop professionally. What kind of skills do you think they need to have? That's this side of the room. If you're watching this not in the room, you can choose any question. On this side of the room, I'd like you to think not so much about the skills, but about the roles that teacher educators need to play. What kind of things do they do? Not necessarily what kind of skills do they need to have, but what do they actually do? Okay, so if you could discuss that, please, with the person sitting next to you. Thank you. Okay. Right then, so anybody on this side of the room, what kind of skills do teacher educators need to have? Okay, can you give this young man here a microphone? Thank you.
A teacher educator
Yes?
must need the presentation skill.
Presentation skills, okay, the ability to present. Presentation skills, okay, thank you very much indeed. Any other skills? Yes, the man in the white shirt over there.
The ability to gauge the knowledge, skills and attitude of the teachers.
Can you say that again?
Ability to gauge the skills, knowledge and attitude of the teachers.
That's right. So the ability to gauge, the ability to assess the teacher in front. Yeah, absolutely, okay.
I think according to me, the teachers, educator, they have ample knowledge and experience which they could share with the young teachers, with the other fellow teachers, and they could inspire them, motivate them, as well as the pedagogies and classroom, every ethics and everything they could share with the teachers.
Okay.
That would be beneficial for them.
Okay, then,
Thank you.
so that's very interesting, actually, thank you. So something, although the question is what kind of skills, you said knowledge and experience and the ability to inspire. We could have a long conversation about whether or not they are skills, couldn't we? That's very interesting you say that. The lady there in the red scarf.
I think they need to have the ability to articulate their thoughts and be empathetic to the teacher who they're educating.
Okay then, so the ability to articulate your thoughts and to be empathetic, okay? All right, skills, yes? You might, we could argue, discuss at some length whether empathy is a skill or it's some kind of attitude that you might have, whether you could learn to be empathetic or not, absolutely. There's a man there in a red tie and a suit looking very smart.
Also the skills that they have about the interaction with students. They have to have such skills with interaction with students, to know the needs of learners, to focus on the learner.
Absolutely, that's a very important point. It's a point that Rod Blytho mentioned, wasn't it? This relationship building, it's the ability to interact, absolutely. Okay, thank you. There's lots of things that we could say. Let's just move on to the second question then. We're not talking about skills, we're talking about roles now. What is it that they have to do? Yes, the woman in the orange sari. Well, it looks orange to me, I'm sorry.
A teacher educator should be a teacher, consultant, and a counselor. He should play a role of a teacher and also as a consultant, as a counsel to the teacher, and he should expect or inspire the teachers what changes he is expecting from the teachers, that qualities and roles should play by him.
Okay then. So, teacher
should be a
teacher
educator
should be somebody that, in terms of their role,
play a role of
teaches,
a teacher.
Somebody who, this is the third part, I understand, somebody who guides.
Yes.
And the second part, in terms of consultant, then, somebody who gives advice.
Counseling.
Yes, that is there available to be consulted. Absolutely. Okay, thank you. The man in the T-shirt with Hind written on it, or it could be love. I don't know.
The teacher educator, in my opinion, needs to play the role of a compass.
The role of a
compass.
A compass.
In guiding. Yes, we've talked about motivation, but criticism, positive criticism is as important as motivation. My teacher trainer is sitting right there. Usha Venkat is my teacher trainer.
Are you a compass, Usha? Uh-huh. Okay.
Thank you. So I can add to the roles I've played. I know that I've been agony-aunt several times on CELTA courses. So this is a new role. Thank you.
Okay, all right, good. Yes, the woman in green.
I think teacher trainers and teacher educators have multi-dimensional roles to play. First of all, they have to be guides. They have to enable the trainees or whoever they train to learn, finding the correct, complex way, and they have to be good at the subject in terms of the subject plus.
Okay, that's a good point. Let's just
methodology.
take 1 second out. Let's just 1 second there. When you say good at their subject, what do you understand by subject? Do you mean, for example, if the teacher educator is working in the area of English language, then the subject is English language? Is that what you mean by that?
They have to understand that also in different grammar, methodology, because once you are teacher trainer or teacher educator, you have to know what you are doing and why you are doing.
Okay.
You have to be able to take into consideration or keep in mind the process plus the product outcome, why I'm doing this activity. And you have to be a good listener, not only imparting and giving, but you have to build whatever your guidance or facilitation is on the learner.
Okay then.
In this case, is a teacher, right?
All right then. It's
so,
very
you have to be able to give feedback properly. It's very important. So there are so many roles you play at the same time. So you have to be good at everything, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. This is a very, very interesting discussion, and it could run for a long time. What I'd like to do, though, now is just to bring it to some kind of conclusion. We talked about professional practices in relation to the CPD framework for teachers. Well, we have the equivalent of professional practices in the CPD framework for teacher educators. So if you could just have a look at those professional practices for a minute or two. How are we doing? Are we down at the end? So, did anybody in the audience say that teacher educators need to know what they're doing? I think the lady here in the green dress talked about that, about knowing the subject. The lady in the orange-ish sari talked about consultant being one of the roles. The third one, applying an understanding of theories of language, of teacher learning and assessment. And in a way that comes back to knowing the subject that you were talking about. Did anybody mention anything about making resources available? I don't think we touched on that. That's something that's in there too in terms of the role, creating, revising, in evaluating professional development activities and resources. Use this, it's really good. Have a look at this article. It will help you to understand a little bit more about what I'm talking. Planning, delivering and evaluating formal professional development activities for teachers. Usha stood up and you talked about delivering teacher training, formalized teacher training courses. Did we mention demonstrating effective teaching? We did, absolutely. That was the first thing that you said. You have to be a teacher. You have to be able to do teaching. Observing, analyzing, giving feedback. Did we mention that? Yes, we did. And taking responsibility for your own professional development. So, just to underline what it is that we're doing, we're doing the framework for teacher educators in pretty much the same way as we're doing the CPD framework for teachers. So we're at the stage now where we're meeting and talking to teachers and to teacher educators and to students as well. And we're asking this fundamental question. What is it that you have to be able to do as a teacher educator? And we're gradually refining these different professional practices for teacher educators. And ultimately, the kind of resource that Tim was talking about will be the same kind of a resource for teacher educators. So as a teacher, you can go to the Teaching English website, look at those professional practices, and locate the kind of resource that you need to develop. The same will be possible for teacher educators. If you want to find out more about how to be a good mentor, if that's the area that you've identified as being an area that you would like to improve on, to develop, to work further on, then you'll be able to go to the British Council website and you'll be able to locate the resources that will specifically help you to do that. Okay, I'm conscious that we only have another 5 minutes left, and we did promise you 3 frameworks, and we've only done 2. So, we've talked about teachers, we've talked about teacher educators, but we haven't talked about schools. Because the third framework that we have developed, which is published now, is the quality standards framework. So as well as saying these are the areas that we think teachers ought to be good at, that teacher educators ought to be good at, we're also saying these are the areas that we think schools as an institution, as institutions, ought to be thinking about. In a very simple, very basic way, covering 10 different standards, which is the equivalent, if you like, of the professional practices. One of the things that our friend said at the beginning here in the second row, who's taking a photograph at the moment, one of the things that he said in answer to the question, how do you know you're a good teacher? He said, well, I know the syllabus. All right? And that's the first thing that a school, we think, needs to have in place. It's a syllabus. So these are the 10 standards. We're talking about programs of study, we're talking about tests, we're talking about the kind of teachers employed in the school. We're talking, importantly, about what happens in the classroom, the performance of the teachers. We're talking about what is, for you, the main subject here at this conference. We're talking about professional development opportunities for teachers. What are schools doing to help teachers to develop professionally? We're talking about the materials that schools use in the classroom, the size and the layout of the classroom, the management systems that are in place to deliver the English language programs of study. We're talking about feedback. The answer that somebody gave to the question, how do you know you're a good teacher, was, well, that's the feedback I've had for the students. So in our quality standards framework for schools, that is a fundamental and an integral part of what we're doing, what we're developing. How do you know that you're doing a good job? Well, ask your students. And finally, advertising. Similarly to the CPD framework for teachers, but not quite the same, we have 5 levels in the quality standards framework for schools, which reflect. We've already talked about this: awareness, understanding, and in our framework, engaged and integrated. And the final level, if you like, is leadership, which is to do with taking a lead in helping other schools to develop their provision. So, 10 standards, 5 levels, and I'd just like to have a look in detail, if we've still got a few minutes left, at one particular standard, and that is standard number 5. And standard number 5 at level 4, at the integrated level, this is what we say that schools should be doing. So if you'd just like to read that for a second. So, are we at the end there? As one example, this is the level 4. So what we're saying is that schools, if you're a good school, if you're operating at the right level, at a level which is conscious of the need and importance of quality, then this is what you need to be doing for your teachers. You need to be providing them with a program of professional support that will help them, the teachers, address and improve the learning outcomes of their students. So, just to sum up then really, those 3 frameworks, the third one we've gone through at the speed of light, but what we believe is that with those 3 frameworks, we're able to achieve a number of things, importantly. We're able to talk about quality, the quality of teachers, the quality of teacher educators, and the quality of schools in a way that is shared and understandable amongst the people that we work with. With these frameworks, we hope to be able to give to teachers and teacher educators and schools the opportunity to see where they are and how they're doing and what they need to work on and what they need to think about. Okay? To give them something to aim for, a path to follow. And finally, and this is the next stage of the development, we're hoping that through these frameworks, we're able to organize in an accessible and easy to understand way the resources that are necessary for teachers to develop what they're doing, for teacher educators to develop what they're doing, and for schools to develop what they're doing. So those are the three frameworks, and those are the three things that we think these frameworks will help the people that we work with to do better. Okay, have we come to the end of the time? No, we've got 10 minutes left. Okay, is that right? Fine.
I'd like to thank John and Tim for that really interesting introduction to the three frameworks. We have about 10 minutes left for questions, so could I ask the audience to think about a short question that you'd like to pose to the speakers. We have about 10 minutes, so if we can make 5, 6 questions, that would be great. If you could put your hands up and someone will run over to you with a microphone. Okay, this side of the room. Okay, gentleman at the front in white, and then the lady at the, yeah, okay, lady at the back first, and then the gentleman in the white shirt at the front.
Thank you. I'm just wondering whether there is any mention about the role of the teacher educator with regard to research, because now we are pushing for this actually where we live. And we are now trying to produce young researchers through action research, for example, in school, and then giving so much attention to graduate studies. We believe that one of the main roles of the teacher educator is to really encourage and push and do something about that. So what's your opinion with regard to this?
Thank you. I'll just take one more question and then we'll ask the speakers to respond. The gentleman in the white shirt at the front.
Thank you. This is a question for Tim, the CPD network. Thank you first.
Could you speak up a little bit?
Okay. Thank you for the homepage, the CPD network. In one of your slides, as to what it shows, you said it will show up your interpretation of the teaching practices. Ought it to be interpretation or the understanding? Because the 12 management practices are laid out.
Okay, I'm finding it a little hard to hear, actually. I think the microphone's a bit muffled. Would you mind repeating the question? Or did you, okay. Tim, did you? No, sorry, we didn't get that.
The slide that shows what it shows, the CPD network.
Yeah, the framework slide,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It says it'll show your interpretation of the practices. Right. I'm just wondering if it should be your understanding instead of interpretation, or is it open to different interpretation? That's the question.
Okay, thank you. So we have 2 questions for the panel. First one about the role of research on the frameworks, and the second about the role of interpretation of the different levels and descriptors.
Okay then, to answer the first question about research, absolutely. Applying an understanding of the professional context in which teachers work. Well, although that doesn't sound much like research work, what we're saying with the professional practices, and will be explained more fully as we have a fuller description of what these things mean, that you cannot apply an understanding of the professional context in which teachers work if you're not either doing research yourself, whatever kind of research that might be, or that you are not in some way following what other people are doing in areas of research too. And if you look at the third one there, it says applying an understanding of theories of language, teacher learning and assessment. So you can't, again, apply an understanding of theories if you yourself are not in some way involved in researching them, whatever form that research takes, or that you are not up to date, involved with the research of others. So yes, it's a really very important point, and it's in there, absolutely, but it's not quite as obvious as it could be.
Thank you, John. So the question was around interpretation, I think, of the stages in the professional practice. I think one of the things that John pointed out right at the beginning was the idea of a common language. Is that what we're hoping to achieve is through the professional practices and elements, is providing a common language which can develop common understanding of what teaching involves. And I know from experience how simple things can be interpreted in different ways by different people from different contexts according to their educational cultures, according to their own experience. So the point I think I was making there was to try, was that we are aware of the potential of people not necessarily interpreting the same way, so therefore one of the things as any teacher needs to do is to scaffold that understanding and provide as much detail and illustration of individual elements as possible. And so to enable people to have a common language. And I think a common language will enable people to move together and progress together in a more effective way.
Okay, thank you. We have time for a couple more questions. Maybe this side of the room. Any questions coming up? No? Do you think this is something, or some of these frameworks are things that you would be able to use in your context? Yeah, I see lots of people nodding and furiously. Okay. Any final points, Tim or John, that you'd like to make?
Well, I'd just like to make, having talked about the work that's in progress in terms of working on this framework and then providing resources and pathways. In terms of a timeline, we're hoping that the first point of kind of global release will probably be the Facebook pages. So we're engaging with teachers to encourage more debate, to enable kind of situations like this where people can contribute and to try out things. So that we're hoping that will be available in April. And then the Teaching English website, the new web page for CPD, will be available at the beginning of June. We're currently completely overhauling the site, modernising the look, so there'll be a whole new range of things to come out. So associated with those, there will be a lot of publicity. So please look out for that and become engaged. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have, okay, one last question from the gentleman at the front. Do you have a microphone for the gentleman here in the purple? Behind you, sir.
My question is to Alison. This this professional development programs, these are basically all which we have discussed here. They are all online programs. And as we know, in most part of India, in rural areas where our teachers are working, this technology has not gone too far. So I would like to ask you, are there any programs, in-house programs or or on-the-field programs conducted by you, especially in Northern India?
Okay, thank you. Well, just to clarify, the programs that John and Tim have been talking about, the website is aligned to the CPD framework, but the CPD framework and the resources and the development programs that are available in many different ways. So they'll be available through face-to-face means, through the website. There'll be content available through mobile phones. So it's a whole range of different content. We organize everything on our website, but you can access it in different ways. So perhaps we can talk afterwards about that. Thank you. So thanks very much to Tim and John. That's Tim Charles Phillips and John Evan Shackleton, just in case you missed it the first time. And please do join me in giving them a warm round of applause for their inputs. And I think we have... And now we have an NO, if you remember what George said, a networking opportunity until 12 o'clock. Thank you.